Hello, everyone. This is a different kind of show tonight. Typically on Wednesdays, we were doing Real Talk on Wednesdays. But now this is a brand new show we've advertised. And this is a show that I think a lot of people will be interested in, bringing on some new cases, shedding some light on some things that kind of need to have light shed on. So tonight's show is a brand new show called The Dark Place, and we're going to be discussing different murders and investigating, digging deep on these things. This is going to be about a six-part series. We're going to do 6 episodes of this type of thing. And we're going to try to, this will be a shortened episode because I never really feel like I can do enough research to make it, to be honest with you, to make it, there's real victims here, and this is real lives that have been affected. So I do want to speak about this subject respectfully and getting the truth and the facts out there. So in doing that, I have consulted, I've done research, to be honest with you, a couple, probably six weeks, watching, reading interviews, reading news articles, investigating articles. So tonight, and we're not trying to glorify any of these actions or any of these things that we're going to be discussing. So viewer and listener discretion is advised. This is The Dark Place, the murder of Cassie Stoddart. So Cassie Jo Stoddart, she was born in, she was killed September 22nd, 2006 by Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk. And they have received life sentences for this murder. Now, tonight I'm going to primarily focus on the actual murder of Cassie. In a future episode, when I feel comfortable going in, we will dive more into the background story of this. But a little bit of history is that Brian wasn't from this. He wasn't from Idaho. He was from Utah. He not really much is known about him. He was adopted, and he moved to Idaho when he was, I think he was 13 years old, 7th or 8th grade. Tori was, I learned this earlier. Tori had a normal childhood, as you could say, but in elementary school, late elementary school, early high school ages, he had written, him and a different friend, had written out where they were planning or talking about planning a school shooting, and at their end of the school dance or their prom, whichever it may be, they went around acting like they were shooting some of the students there. Now, the other student, which went unnamed because they were underage, ended up receiving punishment and went to an alternative school. Tori, nothing really happened to him. He continued on, and years later met Brian through their love of horror movies and scary movies and such. So they both, Brian and Tori both had a crush, a small crush on Casey, and they had been planning this attack for a while, waiting for the right moment where they could go in and do this vicious attack. They had written out a death list, and it contained names of several of their friends and their classmates. Um, Now, from what the research that I've done, they have had, there's actually a video out there on YouTube now. And this was kind of disturbing. One of the most disturbing aspects of this is they really liked the movie Scream, and they really wanted to, I guess, they wanted art to imitate, or I guess making their life imitate art. So they wanted to create a real life Scream. And and you can kind of tell, or I could anyway, that they talk about this. They set up the camera in their school library. One of them's in study hall, the other misses their class, and they set up the camera, and they're talking during school. Even if students are passing in the library, they even acknowledge one or two that what they're going to do. That Cassie is going to be the first victim, and they even apologize to her family. They say apologies to Cassie's family, but someone has to be the first victim, and it might as well be Cassie. Now, originally they were going to murder Cassie and her boyfriend, Matt, but Matt ended up leaving later that night. So we're going to be mainly focusing on the night of the events. So let's get into a little bit about. So there's a big fly. Sorry. I'll edit that out. So on the night of September 22nd, 2006, Casey was house sitting for her aunt and uncle, Allison and Frank, on Whispering Cliffs Drive in northeast Bannock County. So her family, they were out of town. They had hired her to come over and take care of the 3 cats and 2 dogs for the weekend. Now, Casey was visited by her boyfriend, Matt, who arrived around 6 p.m. Later classmates, Brian and Tori, they were about 16. They came over to the house to hang out. Casey gave them a tour of the house, including the basement, and the 4 teens went to the living room to watch the film Kill Bill Volume 2. But Admick and Draper, they ended up leaving the house before the film ending, saying they wanted to go to a movie at the local movie theater instead. So Casey and Matt stayed behind. So what had happened is they had went there. They had got a tour of the house. Casey was house sitting for her aunt and uncle. Friends coming over. They're going to watch Kill Bill Volume 2. They take Brian and Tori around. Here's the basement. Here's this. So as they're getting a tour, one of them stays behind, and they end up leaving some of the doors and windows unlocked, so later they can regain entry. So Tori, they'd unlocked the basement doors so he and Brian could re-enter the house undetected. Sometime after leaving the house, they returned back to the neighborhood. They parked down the street, got out of the car. They had masks, they had gloves, they put on costumes, dark clothing, and gloves, and they quietly snuck into the house. Snuck back into the house while Matt and Casey were upstairs. They were, I guess, watching a movie, talking, whatever. So they begin, Brian and Tori begin flicking the light switch on and off, making it bright, making it dark, making it seem like a power outage, perhaps, making noise, sounds in the basement, to really try to draw Matt and Casey down into the basement. That's what the sole purpose of it was. They wanted to commit the murders in the basement. Matt and Casey, neither one went there. Matt, I think Casey or Matt they'd called their parent asking if Matt could stay the night. The parent wasn't comfortable, so Matt went ahead and went home, and Casey stayed there by herself. At approximately 10:30, Matt's mother picked him up, leaving Casey at the house alone. So Matt then called Brian's cell phone to see what him and Tori were doing, possibly to meet up with them to hang out. Matt said that he could barely hear Tori on the phone because he was whispering, and he assumed that the guys, the boys were at the movie. When in reality, when Matt was calling them, they were in the basement of Casey's house, having to be quiet because Casey was above. So from the basement, the teens turned the lights out again, and they went to the circuit breaker, messed with it again, and hoping that Casey would come down because Matt had left. Now, Brian was armed with a dagger-like typed knife, and Tori had a hunting knife. So some had, it was serrated on the edge, and then the other was straight and not. The weapons were purchased at a pawn shop. So Brian opened and slammed the doors multiple times, trying to draw Casey down. They didn't do that, she didn't do that, so they went upstairs. Casey was laying on the couch in the living room. So the boys then brutally attacked her, stabbing her approximately 33 times. 12 wounds that were fatal. They were potentially fatal and later on proved to be fatal. All this, what they did was documented because before the boys went in, they had recorded on videotape what they were going to do. They'd planned on murdering more. And after this, after they had murdered Cassie, they left, got back into their vehicle, and they also recorded, messages. You can hear it. You can go on YouTube and look this up, and they're talking about what it feels like to murder someone. How they saw and they could see Cassie's eyes went dead. They you can hear it in their voice, but you can also hear the panic and the adrenaline. And it's very alarming to actually hear that. But if you go back, and there's a video, I think it's 44 minutes long on YouTube. If you go in there and put in the Scream Killers, you can watch the entire video of them talking about it. They even have Cassie in the high school hallway on film, on video, 7 hours before they actually murder her. They're talking to her. And so they'd planned this all along. So both Brian and Tori were arrested on September 27th, 2006, and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. During the interrogations, each teen blamed the other. Draper claimed he was in the same room with Adam Chick when Casey was killed, but denied stabbing her. Then he later admitting to stabbing her under the alleged commands from Brian, saying pretty much, hey, if you don't go ahead with me and kill her, I'm going to kill you. Brian led the investigators back to Black Rock Canyon, where the teens had disposed of the clothing, masks, weapons, and the videotape that they tried to burn, trying to get rid of the evidence. Now, you can also go on YouTube and look at the investigation of what actually them being interrogated. And I think that's what originally led me to find this case was I was just watching those interrogation videos, and teen murderers really kind of I guess they pique my interest, because what goes on and what causes a teen to do these horrifying of things. Teens often do the maybe the rebel things, But what makes them do these type of acts of violence and murder, especially if they're coming from a seemingly quote unquote normal home and childhood? So it is when I was looking at, and I'm looking at the pictures now of Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, and they would look like your normal teenage kids, both 16. Now, neither one, other than when Brian had, earlier in his life, had threatened, with the school shooting and things like that. Tori, excuse me, had done that. But Brian kind of had a little bit of a stutter, and he was bullied earlier in life, and I think even in some of the videotape, and when he's talking with the investigators, you can hear his stutter. So it's led to be believed that him being bullied also led to a little bit of his anger, which could have led to him acting out, wanting to commit murder. Cassie just happened to be a random victim and a friend, but it could have also been believed, and it's been, thought of, that both the boys also had a slight crush on her that was not reciprocated by her. But they were still friends, and there was no negativity between the three of them or anything like that. So it's just a very unfortunate thing that even occurred, because I was thinking about it now. It's 2023 now. This happened in 2006. These boys were 17 years old, 16 years old. And it's been 17 years since then. So they have lived more of their life in prison than out of prison. All because they wanted to emulate the brutality of Scream and horror movies in general. And they created this death list to, try to live out this fantasy that they had, because I guess they thought that this was going to be a series of murders. This wasn't going to be one murder and done. And they were trying to go through horror movies, and they also made a list of horror movies and the mistakes that the killers that had made in those movies. But these teens, in addition to being deranged, they were stupid. They were idiots. Everything that you should have done, well, not that you should have done, but if you were looking at it from a murderer standpoint, they've done everything that you should not have done. But it's an interesting case. I was going through some other notes, and originally Matt, Cassie's boyfriend, was one of the prime suspects, because he was one of the only ones, that they thought at the time, to see her alive last. And when he learned of her murder, he didn't really have that much of an initial reaction. It wasn't emotional. So they thought maybe he was a little bit of a suspect to begin with. But he had an alibi, and he took a polygraph and passed it with flying colors, cooperated 100%. And then it came to find out about, Tori and Brian's stories did not check out. They said they had went to a movie called Pulse, which is a horror movie. They knew nothing about the movie, nothing about the plot. They were not spotted. One of their friends had worked at the movie theater, did not say that they had seen them at all. Their car was not picked up on any of the surveillance cameras surrounding the theater. Then they said that they had lied about being at the theater because they were walking, getting into cars, robbing cars. But yet they didn't find anything. They couldn't tell what color cars that they got in, what kind of cars, what street they were trying to get into these cars. So their stories never did match up. But Brian, eventually broke down, told what happened, took them to the location of the the costumes and the weapons and the videotape and so forth, and kind of found out that way. But it's very sad that one of the wounds, and this is forensic pathologist Dr. Charles Garrison, later testified that most of the fatal wounds struck the right ventricle of Cassie's heart. And out of glee, out of joy, the low life killers that they are left her body to bleed out, and they fled. So it's a tragic murder, a tragic death. I didn't do it justice at all. This is the first time actually for me getting into this type of show, getting into this type of real life crime. But it's a tragic case of life imitating art, and it's about these two deranged killers that should not be celebrated at all. And one of the interesting things, as many, is on the video. Brian says that he wants to make a mark on the world and be remembered, and he is remembered, but he's remembered for being a murderer, remembered for taking someone innocent's life, and he's going to have to hopefully think about that crime that he committed both of them, that they committed every single day of their life. And if they can be reformed at all, I do hope, and I'm sure the parents hope, that the guilt will eat at them. Even if rehabilitated, that the guilt will eat at them for the rest of their lives. They are 30, probably 33, 34 years old now. So, speaking logically and statistically, they only have, they've got 50 years left. So they're going to be spending the rest of their life behind bars in Iowa, thinking about what they did, thinking about, was this worth a life and their lives and the family lives ruined for what? The thrill to know what it's like to take someone's life? That's pathetic. And that's what Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk are. They're pathetic wastes. And it's also a thing where I don't know. I never was one to believe that you can blame someone's actions on video games or movies. Everyone has to take responsibility for their own actions. That's just the fact of the matter. Now, can they be influenced from these outside things? Of course. If you're constantly listening to, something, negative, watching something negative, putting negative into your mind, that's what you're going to be putting out into the world. Negative, negative, negative. So yes, it's possible, but can you blame, a specific artist, a specific gun, a specific this, that? No, they had murder is what they were going to do. They were going to murder Cassie, Matt, had he been there, by any means they wanted to. Had it been a knife, had it been, a hammer, a saw, car, brick, whatever it may have been, they wanted to commit murder. Now, Brian says that he originally thought it was going to be a joke. That's not true. That's not true. On the videotape, on the evidence, it shows, you can clearly see and hear them say that they want to commit murder. So right now, they're getting what they deserve 100%. They took an innocent life. She was beloved. She had a full life ahead of her. Um, and it's a disturbing case. But please go and check out the video of when this happened. It's the tape of Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, and in the video they're discussing the murder before, during the day, right before, and right after, and it's them talking about the murder of Cassie Joe Stoddart. So please, thank you. Well, thank you for tuning in and bearing with me. This is the first time, like I said, of doing this type of show. It's going to get better, but we do want to send our condolences out, because I'm sure losing someone in such a horrific manner, regardless of how many years go by, I'm sure it still hurts. So I'm glad that that both Tori and Brian are behind bars, a maximum security prison, and at least justice was served in this case. So thank you for tuning in. Please check out the other things that we have going on the Other People's Show on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. We have a lunch date with the lunch with Casey. He does that on Lunch Date Live, I think is what it's called, Mondays and Wednesdays around noon. And we have Real Talk tomorrow night, 10 p.m. on 92.5 WLSD. We're talking about Sling Blade, the 1996 Billy Bob Thornton Oscar-winning movie. We're also having the Other People's Show at 11 p.m. And in studio for both shows is guest Anthony Wayne. So tune in tomorrow. Saturday, we have a replay on 88.7 WMMT Weisberg at 10 p.m. And I will be back probably with a guest next week, next Wednesday, 10:30, with another episode of The Dark Place. So thank you for tuning in. Have a good night.